Dragon Empire has finally received its very first Tachikaze boss, and we're going to discuss it in today's video. What is up, you guys, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the new Dragon Empire Grade 3 Spino Maxis and the support we have for him now. Now, Spino Maxis, like Claudine, is another monthly Bushiroad promo Vanguard, meaning we probably won't see this card in the next couple of sets. Maybe it might be a set 13 box topper, we're not entirely sure yet, but I think it's an interesting card to talk about because this is the first Dino Dragon boss that we have for Dragon Empire, and although he is another 4-attack Vanguard, there are some pretty interesting things you can do with this deck. The unique thing about this card, and the reason why we're talking about today's video, is the fact that this is one of the very few decks in Standard that we're going to have where all of its pressure comes from on-hit attacks. Now, on-hit attacks in Vanguard are the effects that happen when they hit the Vanguard, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to look at how we can build this deck around that and see the pressure built all around it. Now, with that being said, we're going to take a look at the support it has for the deck now, cards we're not going to use, cards we're going to use in the main deck, as well as a couple of cards we can discuss to put it in when the deck comes out. But before we can look into all that cool stuff, we need to understand what the new Spino Maxis is and what it does. Here is the effect of Steel Dragon Spino Maxis. Steel Lord Dragon Spino Maxis effect states, auto, when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Choose up to 2 Dino Dragons from among them, call them to Rearguard Circle and shuffle your deck. Auto, Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, cost, counterblast 1, and retire one of your Dino Dragon rear guards. Draw a card, and this unit gets power plus 10,000 till end of that battle. Choose up to 1 Dino Dragon from your hand, call it to Rearguard Circle, and retire all of your opponent's rear guards in the same column as the called unit. Steel Lord Dragon Spino Maxis is another on-place Vanguard with the ability to call out 2 cards from the top of the deck if they're 2 Dino Dragons. This is actually pretty lit, as we have the effect now to call out more cards from the deck, superior call units that we want on the board, get our pieces out, as well as deck then 2 cards out from the deck. The second ability leads to our 4th attack. We're going to retire Rearguard, call something else out, and then have 4 attacks for the turn. We also get to retire our opponent's column, give him 10,000 power, and draw a card. So we're going to have a Vanguard that can go up to 23,000, board wipe an opponent's column, get us a 4th attack, draw us a card, and deck then out for 2 more units onto our board. Spino Maxis does a lot of work, and the Dino Dragons are going to be the key cards that are supporting him. Now, the Dino Dragon support that we currently have for Dragon Empire is about 11 to 12 cards. Once set 13 comes out, which is the final set for this season of Standard, I think we're going to get about 2 more Dino Dragon support cards that may or may not help the deck. I'm going to tell you now, they don't. Now, the pros and cons of Spino Maxis is that obviously everything I stated, we get superior call 2 cards, 4 attacks, draw a card, retire a column. The only sad part about this card is the fact that Spino Maxis is going to be locked in playing the Dino Dragon support, which means that in the future, if you want to make this deck better, you're going to have to rely on very unique and specific Dino Dragon support cards to make your deck work, and also your generic support that you play in the deck might not be that viable because there are going to be more targets you take away from calling out for Spino Maxis' first ability. I can already tell now, based off Spino Maxis' first ability, because it is an on-place Vanguard skill, Persona Riding is going to be very important for this deck. None of your other Dino Dragon support that currently exists out right now gain a lot of power outside of a couple of cards, which means that we're going to need that Persona Ride and to get the additional 10,000 power to our front row to make all 4 of our attacks lethal. But to support our strategy, I think it's important we take a look at our ride line. Now, our ride line for Spino Maxis is the Babsagarova ride line because it is the best generic ride line we can take advantage of. Now, the Babsagarova ride line is the most generic ride line that we have for Dragon Empire. It is a counterblast free ride line that gives us a discard target to deck then for another piece, as well as let us ride into the next grade without cost. Being able to deck them by 1 means we increase our chances of seeing triggers, we increase our chances of thinning out the deck for non-Dino Dragon targets for Spino Maxis' ability, and it gives us a discard target going into our next turn. Our grade 2 ride target also gives the ability to recycle that unit, which essentially means that you didn't lose out on any card advantage while riding up from turn 1 all the way up till turn 3. The Babsagarova ride line is the most generic ride line that this deck can take advantage of. I don't think that the Jiva ride line works, the Nirvana ride line works, and none of the other ones work as well. I don't even think the extra soul charge from the Eugene ride line is necessary, simply for the fact that despite having the ability of a grade 1 and grade 2 you can use, the extra soul charge you won't need for this deck. Trust and believe me, the Dino Dragons got your back covered. With all this talk about dinosaurs and what targets we're going to play for Spino Maxis, here are the 3 key pieces I believe you're going to need to max out in this deck to utilize all of its capabilities. Brachiosaurus, Pterosaurus, and Bariodignial. However you pronounce this. These 3 cards are going to be essential to Spino Maxis and making sure its strategy works. As you can see, Spinomaxis, what's going to make this deck good, are all of the on-hit effects that these cards offer. The grade 1 unit Pterosaurus will give the unit that it boosts the effect to retire 2 of your opponent rear guards if the attack hits. Brachiosaurus, a very popular Dragon Empire unit right now, has the ability to retire itself another unit and give you a draw if this attack hits. Barodignal possesses the ability, at the end of the battle it attacks, to move into the soul and give 5,000 power to another unit. As you can see, all of these units have some sort of on-hit pressure or battle phase pressure. That means that the numbers during the battle phase will consistently change, affecting your opponent's ability to guard. Pterosaurus will take out 2 units, Brachiosaurus will take itself off the board, so will Barodignal, which means that if we need to clean up our front row, if we need to make more space for cards or to set up for the future play, and we're going to do with our unit, we can go ahead and use this card to make it work. And another key factor to notice about all of these cards is that none of these cards cost anything. The grade 1 does cost a Soul Blast, but the grade 3 makes up for it, and the cost of the grade 2 is retiring itself, which isn't that detrimental to our strategy because we're going to be able to call a new unit to the circle that that card has come out on. Which means that we really haven't lost any sort of card advantage throughout the entirety of this game, and all of these cards are making up the resources that they're taking. Now, Spinomaxis is going to require you to play a lot of Dino Dragon support, and 2 other key pieces of Dino Dragon support I think you're going to need is Tribash and Geesefort. Now, Tribash has the ability to move itself into the soul if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, and apply +1 critical to your Vanguard. Geesefort has the ability to restand itself and give 2,000 power to itself if you retire something and this card is at rest. And then obviously for the grade 2 we have the Ride Cycler. Now Tribash and Geesefort, one is a restanding battle phase unit that we can search out and call it out to rear guard, and then Tribash is a unit that we can search out and gives +1 critical to the Vanguard. Keep in mind that the ability of the previous cards that I showcased, as well as Spinomaxis, means that during the battle phase we have the potential to retire up to 4 to 3 rear guards, which means that Tribash's ability should be live in 9 out of 10 circumstances unless your opponent has a full board, or if they have some sort of effect that prevents the rear guards from being retired. Outside of Stoicheia and like a couple of other cards, this is an effect that you really have to worry about, so that's not something that's going to get in the way of Tribash, and it ties in with Geesefort's ability as well. Because Geesefort has the ability to restand itself during any period of the game, as long as it's in the back row, and get 2,000 power when you retire something, means that the unit that you retire in front of Geesefort, you can boost with it first, retire it to activate the effect of Spinomaxis, call a new card out, Spinomaxis gets its power, restand it behind the unit that it just called out, which means that you have a 10k booster for your next attacker. And if you're on a Persona Ride turn, it's still 10,000 power, so you're essentially swinging for full power on your 4th attack. Now, the Ride Cycler might be the card you guys are wondering most about, since it's not a Dino Dragon. But the thing is with the Ride Cycler is, it's one of the very few pieces that we have currently in Standard right now that can retire entire columns while also providing card advantage. One of the key issues I see with Spinomaxis after testing it out and seeing other people try it out is that in terms of card advantage, this deck will not be the strongest. None of your pieces draw, and the ones that do draw, such as Brachiosaurus and draw triggers, those draw under certain circumstances, which means that Spinomaxis isn't going to have any way of recuperating cards to its hand. So with the Basagradava Ride line, as well as the Ride Cycler, while your soul might be low, which is something we can easily repair in this deck with the effect of our other cards, like Tribash and Barodignal, we are going to need this card to draw us cards, and also being one of the key cards we can use during the main phase to retire large amounts of units. While I do think that Kojofflin is the most flexible card out of the 3 that you see here, I do think it is something you might want to keep on the side, or at least a 2 of when building this deck in the future. With both the first page and the second page showcase, I think that these are all key cards you're going to want to showcase and have while you're playing Spinomaxis. All of these cards do something that improve both the card advantage, they're searchable targets, and they all have unique effects that can help you change the tide of the game, specifically during the battle phase. As again, one of the key things that's going to make Spinomaxis a good deck when it comes out, or have any chance of being tier, is the fact that all of your pressure comes from the battle phase and on hit effects. And there are a lot of effects that we can use that will play into this strategy and even support it as well. So some of the Spinomax tech and option cards that we can use for the deck are the following. Now, as we see on the top left corner of the page, Silent Crow, Bernaya, and Tenchestead are cards that we have for grade 1 support that are not Dino Dragons. But all of these cards do something that's very important for the deck, which is improve your card advantage. Stealth Crow has the ability to counterblast 1 and draw a card if you retire something in the same column. Keep in mind that Spinomaxis' ability retires an entire column, and we can simply retire the unit in the column that we call that card out and draw us a card. That means that we'll be able to essentially +1 off retiring another card for Counterblast. And since Counterblast is not a resource we're using in this deck outside of Spinomaxis and the grade 2 Ride Cycler under certain conditions, this is a great card to recuperate your card advantage during the battle phase. However, if you don't want to go this route and use CB because you want to invest into something else, there's also Bernaya. Now, while popular in the Gandiva deck, this is a generic card that at the end of the battle it boosts. You can draw a card and bind this card. Now, the binding you don't care for because you're not Gandiva, so it doesn't do anything for you, but this is a card that for a Counterblast free and taking itself off the board can draw you a card. Now, another card you definitely want to keep on the back burner is Tachikaze. This is a card that came out all the way in set 1 or 2 of Standard, I believe, but it's always had a very solid effect. This unit has the ability to, on hit, Counterblast 1, search out your grade 3 Vanguard and put it into your hand. This card will automatically search out your Spino Maxis grade 3, and we've already established how important Persona Rise effect is going to be in this deck because your Vanguard's on placement ability. And with that being said, you're going to have a card that applies more pressure to your attacks. This will force your opponent to guard more of your attacks, meaning less cards will be in their hand to call units with and defend against your other attacks. All of these grade 1s will improve the card advantage issue that Spinomaxis is going to have, and they all do it in different unique ways. Silent Crow draws you a card for a Counterblast. Bernaya draws you a card for a free bind by taking itself off the board, and then Tachikaze takes itself off the board as well, but for a Counterblast you would search out your Persona Ride target, setting you up for next turn. While this is a good route to go for card advantage, if you want to take a different route, I actually think that the order support for Dragon Empire is another solid way to go. Beat Up Draco Kid, the Dragon Dancer, and their order card will actually support the deck strategy a lot. Now, the Beat Up Draco Kid becomes a 13k attacker or booster if you activate the Order card. The Order card, A Series Fight, has the effect to Soul Blast 1 and retire one of your opponent's front or rear guards. That's actually very important because remember, some of the effects we use in this deck require you to have a certain amount of rear guards so that you can use their abilities. Also, if you retire a rear guard with the Order support and you're playing Silent Crow in the deck or Bernaya, those cards also synergize together well. The grade 2 Dancer is probably the most impactful card in this situation, as for a Soul Blast, you could search the top 5 cards of your deck and call another card. So while this is card advantage not directly to your hand, you're not using much of the cards in your hand to get more bodies onto the board that you're going to make up for with anyway because of Spinomaxis' ability to get 2 Dino Dragons out the deck from the top 7 check. While all of the grade 1 support as well as the order support are huge benefactors for this deck, something important to note, and the reason why I think you're going to have to be very picky on what support you play in this deck that's not Dino Dragon, is because none of these cards are searchable. Spinomaxis' ability is locked into calling 2 Dino Dragon supports, and all of these cards are not Dino Dragons, which means that they are going to take away from your count of Dino Dragons in the deck, which means that you'll have to be cautious of the ratios that you play in the deck to make it work. But nonetheless, I do think that these are strong support cards you can play into the deck to patch all the holes in Spinomaxis' weakness. Spinomaxis is off to a very strong start. This card has really good main deck units you can call out, extra critical, draw power, battle phase power, retire, and with all of the stuff that I've showcased in terms of tech options and support, you're going to have to play into the deck because you need to fill out your 50 card deck. Here's some other support cards I think you should keep in mind for the deck, but I don't think that you're going to want to play them in the deck, at least currently not right now. Now, the grade 3 Soul Dragon Cannon is a very popular card used in Spinomaxis, as this is a 23k beat stick that you get for free. However, its only restriction is that you can't have any front or rear guard units in play on your opponent, otherwise it cannot attack. So automatically what this means is the fact that this card is only good under certain circumstances, and to make it work you have to get rid of all your opponent's front or rear guards, and if they're not planning for this card, then you can easily get a 23k beat stick and on Persona Ride turns 33,000 attacker. However, if you cannot get rid of that unit that is in the front row, this card essentially becomes a dead card since it cannot attack. With that being said, the next card that we have, and probably my favorite on the list, is Scalp Terra. Now, Scalp Terra has the ability to retire one of your opponent's rear guards when it's boosted by an attack and get plus 2,000 power. Very solid effect, I'll give it that. It happens in the early game, not grade 3 restricted, so if your opponent's rushing you and you have the open CB, you can drop this card, Brachial Force, and a support card, and potentially get a 2-card retire on their turn. However, However, Scout Terra, compared to the other stuff, the power bonus is just very weak, and it's another CB card. And depending on the route that you're going in terms of support for the deck, your counterblast is always going to have to be something that you have to pay attention to, because we're not going to be able to play any counter charges in this build. And for the last card, and probably like the secondary best grade 1 support for this deck, we have Winged Dragon Cannon. What? We have a Flying Dragon card. Now, Winged Dragon Canoptero, oh, I said the name right. This card will give 5,000 power for a Soul Blast of 2 to 2 of your units if you activate an order card. Now, this will naturally synergize with the order support of the deck if that's the route you want to go, and it is a Dino Dragon target which you can call out, but it is a very expensive card. This is going to be a Soul Blast 3 play that you do to use all of the effects in one turn. If you want to use the effect of the order, that's going to be 1 Soul Blast. This effect is 2 Soul Blasts, and if you want to use the Dancer, that's 4 Soul Blasts in one turn. And while we do have support for Dino Dragons to Soul Charge 2, because the new Grade 1, that Grade 1 only gives you the Soul Charge 2 under very special circumstances, and that's if you went first. Yes, so outside of that very special circumstances, your Riot Line takes up the soul, the Order takes up the soul. It's just a very expensive card to set up for right now, and unless you're playing another Order in the deck that is not the one that you're playing with the Ride Chain, it's not going to work. I do want to make it very clear though that I think all of these Dino Dragon cards are something you should know about and probably have